Star Trek, Primitive Passenger Season 6, Episode 02, Morning. Drop me someplace fun with lots of people. I know just the place, Alara replied, her tone playful. In an instant, Nolan vanished from the sleek confines of the Havoc, only to rematerialize midair, clad in a pair of shorts, plummeting down a very tall water slide on a gloriously sunny day. Water rushed around him, and he barely had time to process the change before he was blasted into a pool at the slide's bottom. He stood up in the waist-deep water, dripping wet and bewildered, as onlookers burst into laughter. Alara, he yelled to the sky, laughing as he wiped the water from his face. Realizing people were watching him, he straightened up. Good morning, he shouted cheerfully. The crowd laughed again, amused by his enthusiasm in what was clearly late afternoon on the planet they called morning. As the laughter subsided, Nolan noticed the curious but respectful expressions on the faces of the young Neos surrounding him. They knew him, had heard countless tales, but couldn't fathom why he was standing in their pool. The sharp-eyed, smiling girl stepped forward. "Welcome to our corner of the universe, Mr. Mercer," she said warmly. "I'm Julie Berlin, and this is Buff, or Buffalo Tony, if you prefer." Buff, a broad-shouldered young man with a ready grin, gave a small wave. "Buff's fine. Pleased to meet you, sir," he added, his eyes twinkling with humor. Nolan shook hands with both of them. "Nice to meet you, Julie Buff. Please, just Nolan." "I'm far too undressed for misters and sirs," he said, glancing around. "This place is a blast." Julie nodded. "She's a work in progress, but we're getting there. Want to take a look around?" "Lead the way," Nolan replied. With that, they stepped out of the pool and started walking through the bustling recreational area. As they strolled, Julie explained the naming conventions. "The oldest group of us chose old Earth names from your time. It felt like a way to be closer to you," she said awkwardly. "And we picked last names from old Earth cities. Hence, I'm Julie Berlin. And I'm Buff, because I filled out my form backward," Buff added with a chuckle. "But it stuck, so here I am." Nolan laughed. "Buff suits you." Turning to Julie, he added, "I had a Julie in my class at school. She was probably the smartest one of all of us." Buff and Julie exchanged glances. They knew all of Nolan's classmates' names, and just about everything one could know about a man who lived over 400 years ago. As they continued walking, Nolan learned more about their lives. Julie, initially given the knowledge of warp field mechanics, had served 3 years as a warp engineer in space. "Now I'm shifting to hybrid cloning techniques," she said. "I want to work in ag for the rest of my service." Buff, on the other hand, was trained as a mining engineer but had an accident that ended his service. "So, I turned my focus to old Earth history," he said, not sure how to express the next part. Specializing, actually, in Nolan Mercer studies. Nolan raised an eyebrow. Nolan Mercer. Studies? For real? He was somewhat stupefied that such a thing existed. "I guess that makes this moment as surreal for you as it does for me." Buff laughed. "You can't imagine." Their walk took them through the water park and entertainment area, eventually leading them to a familiar sight for Nolan. A statue of Big Boy from the old Bob's Big Boy restaurant chain, complete with red and white checkered bib overalls, a big curl in his hair, and holding a giant hamburger over his head on a platter. "Are you kidding me?" Nolan broke out, laughing. "A Big Boy statue." Julie grinned. "Someone thought it was a nice touch of nostalgia." "We can eat at Big Boy if you want." Nolan nodded, still chuckling. "Oh, heck yeah. Let's get cleaned up first." Julie and Buff led him to a building off to the side, a locker room with showers, towels, and clothes for people to prepare to leave the water park. As they entered, a huge crowd of Neos tried to follow them in. Buff nodded to one of the other men, who stepped up to block the doorway and prevent a stampede. Nolan glanced back at the crowd with a smile. "We'll catch up with everyone soon," he assured them. "Let's get presentable first." The crowd dispersed as people began running to the other locker room facilities nearby. They wanted to get changed quickly, not to miss a thing. With that, Nolan, Julie, and Buff headed into the locker room. the anticipation of the meal ahead buzzing in the air. Nolan felt a sense of belonging he hadn't experienced in a long time. He wasn't just a myth or a legend here. He was part of their world, and they were part of his. Nolan stood in the middle of the co-ed locker room, feeling out of place and slightly embarrassed. The Victorian influence from his time on Earth still made him uneasy in such settings, especially since he looked so different from the young people around him. His rugged appearance, with tattoos and weathered flesh, burns, slash marks, and cuts, all starkly contrasted with the youthful, unblemished bodies surrounding him. "I think they're still serving breakfast, right?" Julie asked Buff. "They're always serving breakfast, 36 hours a day," Buff replied, chuckling. Julie, nude and toweling her hair, looked at Nolan, who quickly averted his gaze. "We like breakfast here any time of day. Is that okay?" "Breakfast for dinner is my favorite," Nolan exclaimed. Julie and Buff laughed in unison. "We know," they both said. Nolan realized he had no clothes to change into, and the kids' clothes were not his style. He just had his comm badge Alara had put in the pocket of his shorts. "Alara, clothes," he said, butt naked and holding his comm badge. A shimmering light surrounded Nolan, and he was dressed in his usual tactical black pants, bloused on heavy boots, a protective vest, and a long-sleeved black shirt, his blaster pistol on his hip. Everyone stared at him. Maybe more casual, Ilara. Fun, remember? More shimmering light. And Nolan was naked again. "Come, O.N.," he muttered as the stairs weighed down on him. Another transport. And Nolan was wearing loose-fitting, light-colored clothing, comfortable shoes, and a hat with fishhooks in it. He took off the hat, shook his head, and chuckled. "That girl, I swear, she enjoys this way too much," Nolan said with a sheepish smile, tossing the hat into a recycling bin. Was that Ilara?" Julie's eyes were fixed on Nolan. "She's really like an extension of you, isn't she? I've read so much about her. I honestly don't know how I'd live in this century without her. I may have had a good idea or two in the last couple 100 years, but Ilara kept me alive in the Delta for decades. She got me home, and she's the one who's made most of my ideas into reality." Everyone dressed and headed out the door of the locker room building. "She'd love to meet you," Nolan smiled at Julie. "How did you do that?" Buff asked, with the clothes. As they stepped back out into the sunlight, throngs of people stepped back and let them through the crowd. Then little bunches of Neos filing in behind the group. "I can give you the specs of how we have it designed now. It has some bugs," Nolan replied. "She left me with no pants on Delos 5, and it was freezing, but I'm still not entirely convinced it was a problem with the system." Following Julie toward the big boy, Nolan smelled some sort of heaven floating in the air. "Is that bacon?" And Nolan, Julie, Buff, and a few others made their way into the restaurant and were quickly led to a table. As they were seated, people began pouring into the big boy, taking up every seat in the place. Nolan grabbed a menu from the stand on the table. Julie put her hand on his. "You won't need that here. This is your food, Nolan. Just order what you want." Nolan opened the menu anyway. It felt like he had time-warped 400 years into the past, looking at the list of foods just like they would have in an old Earth diner. Meatloaf, hamburgers, pork chops, lasagna, and on the next page, breakfast. "We eat real food here, Nolan." He didn't understand. "That bacon, sausage, and ham come from scrofa raised over on Horizon. Just days ago they were processed for us. The eggs are from an egg up here on Morning, on the northern continent." She pointed randomly. "They come from unaltered chickens and are fed unaltered grains, greens, and seeds," she said with pride. "Real food." 2 waiters arrived with big trays full of plates and drinks for everyone. Pork chops and eggs with hash browns, scrambled eggs with bacon and breakfast sausages, a short stack of pancakes on a separate plate, butter melting on top. More and more plates and drinks were put on the table. Everyone dug in. Nolan rolled his eyes, savoring his first bite. "Incredible," he said, his voice muffled by a mouthful of food. He swallowed and looked around expectantly. "Can I get a coffee?" The table fell silent. Forks paused mid-air, and eyes widened in surprise. The clatter of breakfast utensils against plates ceased, leaving an almost eerie stillness. "What?" Nolan repeated, his tone edging on impatience. "Coffee." Julie, sitting beside him, gently placed her hand on his arm. "We don't drink coffee here, Nolan," she whispered, her eyes serious. "It's not allowed. It's actually prohibited." She emphasized the final word, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial hush. "What?" Nolan's eyebrows shot up, his face contorting into an incredulous expression. The logic of such a restriction eluded him entirely. Who would impose such a nonsensical rule? Heads would roll. The young, blonde woman with short hair, sitting to Nolan's right, leaned in to explain. "It's considered bad for people of our age, Nolan. They say it can stunt your growth if you drink it when you're too young." Nolan closed his eyes and shook his head slowly, memories flooding back. He recalled being told the same thing as a child, the familiar refrain of, "It'll stunt your growth." It was a parental mantra, like "you'll shoot your eye out" when you wanted a BB gun, or "it's a school night" if you wanted to stay up late. A huge smile spread across his face as he opened his eyes and looked around at the children. These kids were growing up without parents, and the silly things parents used to say had become gospel to them. Nolan found it remarkable. These 6- and 7-year-olds, all borderline geniuses, working in space, engaging in dangerous mining operations, building weapons of war, yet maintaining a society of such sweetness and naivety. He loved them, every single one. A tear slid down Nolan's cheek, which he quickly caught with his napkin, dabbing at his eye. "What's your name?" he asked the blonde. "I'm Lori Talahina," she replied. "Don't worry. You can get coffee when you're back on the Havoc, right?" She mistook Nolan's reaction as upset over the coffee. Shaking off the sentimentality, Nolan asked, "Why Lori Talahina?" A pad materialized on the table next to him. "I looked through your old school book, the directory of students with all the pictures," Lori explained, referring to a high school yearbook. "Right next to your picture was a nice-looking girl named Lori, and I thought Lori is next to Nolan, so I chose Lori." "And now you are next to Nolan," he said, smiling. She flashed an embarrassed smile. "I know you lived between two of the great capital cities of Red Oak and Talahina when you were alive. So I thought Talahina sounded nice, and it was close to Nolan. Close to you." He put his arm around her and drew her in tight. "That's the sweetest thing I've ever heard." She buried her embarrassment as she buried her face in his chest. Even over the smell of bacon, Lori's scent was enchanting. With his other hand, he passed the pad over to Buff, who started tapping away on it. They've been trying to grow real coffee, for export, of course, over on Horizon. But there are very few strains of Old Earth coffee remaining, and last I heard, the recent crop had failed," said a young man sitting next to Buff. "Do you know who's been heading up the project?" Nolan asked. "A team of students from Major City, mostly. I heard they were in contact with a Klingon scientist regarding Raktajino as well." Nolan tilted his head and reached out with his right hand. "I'm Stephen Casper. Call me Steve." The pride in Stephen's eyes from being recognized and shaking Nolan's hand did not go unnoticed. "Good to meet ya." Nolan's Oklahoma accent kicked in automatically. "I work with Dren Nacombe on Empire North. I'll have him make a call." Nolan tapped his comm. "The guy got Danadian corn to grow inside of a moon. Maybe he can help." Buff, lost in the pad, looked up. I have some ideas." He looked at Nolan as if he had just returned from space. "Is this your work?" "No, I didn't build it. Ilara knew what I wanted to achieve, and she got the team in the transporter lab on Empire North started on it, thinking of switching to transporter tech. I guess I hadn't considered it before, but this actually seems like it would be easy to clean up," Buff said, tapping on the display again. Quietly, he added, "When I was on Miner 4732 and the rupture happened, if we'd had a system that transported everyone into full gear, more people would have lived. So what I selfishly built for my comfort and convenience could actually have a purpose." Nolan looked at Buff with a serious expression. I think, done right, it would have saved 6 lives on Miner 4732. The hurt on Buff's face was real. Nolan didn't know the circumstances, but the incident on mining asteroid 4732 had left young Buff with something he'd carry for the rest of his life. If you want the project, it's yours, Buff, Nolan said sternly, finishing his cola. You might have to put your historian duties on the back burner for a while. As they continued eating, the atmosphere lightened. Conversations filled the room, and Nolan felt a sense of belonging and purpose. The Neo's enthusiasm was contagious, and he realized that despite their age and inexperience, they had created something truly remarkable, a society that combined human ingenuity with an innocence he thought lost. Nolan began to see how his interaction with the Neos could kickstart a number of great projects. Imagine sending a bag of fresh roasted coffee beans to Admiral Janeway at the Academy. He was not above bribery for a chance to step foot on Earth again. As they finished their meal, Nolan felt excitement building. The potential of the Neos was incredible, and he realized that his presence here could be the catalyst for something truly extraordinary. Together, they could bridge the past and the future, combining the wisdom of his experiences with their boundless energy and creativity. Walking out of the Big Boy, Nolan felt a renewed sense of purpose. The sun was shining, the air was filled with laughter and conversation, and he knew that great things were on the horizon, and he needed a nap. The soft chime of the comm panel pierced the quiet darkness of Nolan's quarters. His eyes fluttered open, mind still foggy with sleep. Computer time, he mumbled. The time is 0217 hours, came the calm reply. Nolan, open the door. Lori Talahina's voice, using the classic loud whisper, emanated from the comm. With a groan, Nolan pushed himself up. Computer, door, he commanded, squinting as the door's dim light spilled into the room. Lori's silhouette appeared in the doorway, her curves unmistakable in the low light. Without a word, she padded across the room, her bare feet silent on the cool floor. Nolan felt the mattress dip as she climbed in, her warm skin brushing against his as she crawled over and settled beside him. Escaped Nolan, his head filled with remnants of sleep. His senses filled with Lori's scent, the sound of her breath so close, her touch. Lori's reply was to nestle closer, her head finding the hollow of his shoulder. She murmured, "It was good to have you with us today." Nolan's arm instinctively wrapped around her, his fingers tracing lazy circles on her skin. Despite his centuries of life, the simple intimacy of the moment stirred something within him. "It was good to be here," he replied softly. They lay in comfortable silence, the rhythm of their breathing synchronizing. Lori's hand rested on Nolan's chest, rising and falling with each breath. The night deepened around them, but neither noticed as Lori pulled herself up onto Nolan and kissed him. Sunlight streamed through the windows when Nolan next opened his eyes. Lori was curled against him, her golden hair playing across her face. He blinked, momentarily disoriented. "Computer time." "The time is 13:42 hours, the computer chirped. Beside him, Lori stirred. Her eyes widened as realization dawned. "Oh no, my class." She tossed her body across Nolan's and grabbed his comm badge from the nightstand. "Computer, contact my assistant, Tyler." Nolan putting his arms around her, they both fought off laughter. A moment later, Tyler's voice came through. "Yes, Professor Talahina?" "Tyler, I'm so sorry, but I won't make it to class today. Can you run through the lesson plan we discussed? And maybe throw in a pop quiz to keep them on their toes?" "Of course, Professor. Is everything all right?" Lori glanced at Nolan, a mischievous glint in her eye. "Everything's fine. Just overslept. Thanks, Tyler." As the communication ended, Lori flopped back onto the bed, giggling. Nolan couldn't help but join in, the laughter bubbling up from deep within him. He effortlessly lifted her up above him, arms extended. She naturally straddled him and leaned forward to kiss him. Later, as Lori prepared to leave, she eyed Nolan's closet with a grin. "Mind if I borrow something?" Before Nolan could respond, she had already slipped into one of his black shirts, the hem falling to her mid-thigh. She paired it with Nolan's belt to give it shape. "See you later, Nolan," she called over her shoulder, bare feet padding her way into the brightly sunlit courtyard. Nolan watched her go, a warm feeling of satiation and affection within him. Through the closing door he caught glimpses of surprised looks from passing Neos, Laurie's attire leaving little doubt about where she'd spent the night. As the door slid shut, Nolan leaned against the wall, running a hand through his hair. The weight of his centuries pressed upon him, yet the warmth of the night lingered. Life with the Neos was a constant reminder of the vibrancy of youth, the complexity of relationships, and the unexpected joys that could be found even after 400 years of existence. With a soft smile, Nolan turned to prepare for the day ahead, knowing that on morning, every day brought new surprises.